My uncle offered me the chance to house sit while he whisked off to Europe with his family for vacation. While my aunt and cousin had already jetted off ahead, my uncle had to wrap up some last-minute business affairs. Once he tied up all the loose ends, he entrusted me with the responsibility of looking after his house for a few weeks. He knew I craved the solitude of living alone, so he saw this as the perfect opportunity for me to experience it for the first time. He laid down some ground rules, forbidding me from inviting friends over or spending too much time in the yard. I didn't quite grasp the reason behind these rules, but I assumed he wanted to ensure my safety, especially with the heavy snowfall outside posing potential risks. After imparting a plethora of instructions on house care, he stocked the refrigerator with an abundance of food and bid his farewell. Initially, the solitude was more liberating than I had imagined. I didn't feel uneasy being alone, and I relished the freedom to do as I pleased. Everything seemed to be going smoothly until a noise jolted me awake in the dead of night. Startled more than scared, I hurriedly scanned the room, but there was nothing except the eerie darkness illuminated by the moonlight streaming through the window. Peering outside, I discovered not only snow falling, but also what appeared to be a blizzard raging on. Bewildered, I stood there, oblivious to the unfolding events. Suddenly, the same noise echoed from the front door downstairs, causing my heart to race. I entertained the possibility of something merely knocking against the door, but uncertainty gripped me. Descending the stairs, I flicked on every light, cautiously peering through the peephole. To my horror, I discovered footprints leading straight to the door. With trembling hands, I slammed the door shut and bolted it, my breaths coming in ragged gasps. Who the hell would be out in this weather? I muttered, casting anxious glances around the house, trying to decide on my next course of action. Rushing to the back door, I strained to see through the snowy darkness. Amidst the swirling snowflakes, I could have sworn I glimpsed a small figure, perhaps a child, walking away from the house. Filled with both fear and concern for the child's well-being, I dashed upstairs to grab my phone and dialed 911 to report the incident. Peering out of the back window, I waited anxiously, but the child was nowhere to be seen when the police arrived. Providing them with a detailed account of the events, we were interrupted by a faint knock at the front door. Intrigued, one of the officers opened the door to reveal the same child from earlier. Concern etched on their faces, they ushered the child inside, who appeared underdressed for the harsh weather. As one officer ventured outside to survey the surroundings, the child remained silent, their expressions seemingly vacant, lost in their own thoughts. As the officers probed the child with questions about their whereabouts and guardians, the child's responses were minimal, leaving us all perplexed. The entire situation felt surreal, unfolding right before my eyes, yet defying reality. Who wanders about in a blizzard at such a late hour? Why did the child knock on my door, alone and seemingly devoid of emotion? Weeks passed without answers. By the time my uncle returned, relieving me of my house-sitting duties, we were still in the dark about the child's true identity. However, weeks later, another missing child was discovered outside my uncle's house, further deepening the mystery. Though the incidents appeared unrelated, the peculiar circumstances raised unsettling questions. Was my uncle hiding something? Were these occurrences mere coincidences, or was there something more sinister at play? The uncertainty lingered, leaving me to ponder the enigmatic events that transpired in the wake of my solitary house-sitting experience.
I had always harbored a deep-seated desire to experience winter fishing. There was an inexplicable allure to the tranquil chill and the pristine blanket of snow draping the riverbanks. However, my enthusiasm was dampened by the stark reality that I couldn't find a single soul willing to accompany me on this adventure. Despite considering myself a resilient and independent woman, the thought of braving the woods solo didn't exactly seem like the epitome of wisdom. After weeks of futile attempts to persuade someone to join me, it gradually dawned on me that embarking on this expedition alone was my only viable option. Keeping a vigilant watch on the weather forecasts, I pinpointed an early January date for my outing. It was widely known as our coldest month, but an unprecedented stretch of sunny days was predicted, a stroke of luck that I couldn't overlook. Expressing gratitude for the favorable weather conditions, I informed my family of my plans. Before I departed, my mother discreetly slipped an AirTag into my bag as an added safety precaution. Parking my car along the main road, I proceeded to follow the trail leading to the fishing spot recommended by a colleague from work. However, an ominous sensation began to gnaw at me. My senses became acutely attuned, and an eerie chill crept down my spine, as though I was being observed, or worse, followed. Underestimating the depth of the snow, I soon found myself grappling with icy crusts that stubbornly refused to yield beneath my weight, leaving me with damp, frigid socks. Despite these warning signs, I pressed on, attempting to quell the rising tide of unease within me, while echoing my mother's counsel not to succumb to paranoia. The sensation of being under scrutiny persisted as I trudged along the trail. Every rustle of a branch or crunch of snow beneath my boots sent my heart racing, though I tried to attribute these disturbances to benign wildlife. Yet, any semblance of relief I felt upon reaching the riverbank was swiftly eclipsed by a startling discovery. As I settled in to commence fishing, a guttural noise emanating from across the river jolted me out of my reverie. Instinctively, I reached for my firearm, scanning the vicinity apprehensively, only to discern the figure of a naked man perched atop a fallen tree, his extremities displaying ominous signs of severe frostbite. It was a surreal and unsettling sight, reminiscent of a twisted nightmare. With mounting trepidation, I hastened to pack up my gear as the enigmatic figure inexplicably vanished into thin air. Panic seized hold of me. Was he lurking nearby, poised to strike? With trembling hands, I retraced my steps, each sound magnifying my sense of dread. To my horror, the apparition materialized once more, mere feet away, prompting me to issue a fervent warning to maintain a safe distance. Yet my pleas fell on deaf ears as he steadily advanced towards me. Driven by sheer desperation, I discharged my weapon, aiming squarely for his lower extremities in a frantic bid to secure my escape. The resultant cry of anguish reverberated through the air, but as I attempted to flee, his outstretched hand grasped for me, his intentions shrouded in a veil of malevolence. Fueled by primal terror, I instinctively lashed out, delivering a forceful blow that sent him sprawling to the ground, before racing away, tears streaming down my cheeks. Upon reaching my car, a sense of foreboding engulfed me as I discovered that it stubbornly refused to start. Gripped by a paralyzing fear, I hastily dialed 911, all the while casting furtive glances over my shoulder as the naked apparition materialized once more, pounding furiously on the vehicle and emitting blood-curdling screams. Relief flooded my senses as the distant wail of approaching police sirens heralded their imminent arrival, causing the spectral figure to vanish into the ether once more. In the aftermath of the harrowing encounter, I recounted the chilling ordeal to the responding officers, who conducted a thorough search of the area, yet found no trace of the mysterious intruder. The haunting memories of that traumatic incident would continue to plague my dreams for months to come, but thankfully, I never again crossed paths with that spectral entity. One thing remains abundantly clear: never again will I venture into those ominous woods unaccompanied.
I've always been more of an indoor person, finding solace in the quiet comfort of my home with a good book and a warm cup of coffee. So when my boyfriend Greg suggested a winter hike, I hesitated. He's the adventurous type, always seeking excitement and thrills, while I prefer the safety and familiarity of my everyday routine. Yet, wanting to share in his enthusiasm and make him happy, I reluctantly agreed to join him. As we embarked on our journey, driving up the snow-covered mountain, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in the pit of my stomach. Despite the breathtaking beauty of the landscape with snow-capped trees and icy streams, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding lingering in the crisp winter air. Upon reaching the trailhead, I was relieved to see other cars parked nearby, a sign that we weren't alone in our adventure. We retrieved our backpacks from the trunk of the car and began our trek into the wilderness, following the trail that wound its way through the snowy forest. The hike was supposed to be a brief excursion, just a few hours there and back, with the sun shining brightly overhead, casting a warm golden glow over the snowy landscape. I felt a glimmer of optimism despite my apprehension. Greg's infectious enthusiasm rubbed off on me, and for a moment, I allowed myself to forget my worries and simply enjoy the moment. As we ventured deeper into the woods, the snow-covered trail stretched out before us like a blank canvas, inviting us to explore its hidden mysteries. We took turns leading the way, our boots crunching through the pristine snow with each step. The crisp winter air filled our lungs, invigorating us as we pressed onward. But then, disaster struck. In a moment of distraction, I stopped to tie my shoelaces and take a sip of water, assuming Greg had noticed my pause. But when I looked up, he was gone, vanished into thin air without a trace. Panic gripped me as I called out his name, my voice echoing through the silent forest. For what felt like an eternity, I searched desperately for any sign of Greg, my heart pounding in my chest with each passing moment. But as the snow began to fall heavier, obscuring my vision and muffling the sounds of the forest, I realized with a sinking feeling that I was completely and utterly alone. As I trudged through the snow, my mind raced with a million terrifying thoughts. What if Greg was hurt? What if he was lost, just like me? What if we were both stranded out here in the wilderness, with no one to hear our cries for help? With each passing minute, the forest seemed to close in around me, its towering trees casting long, ominous shadows that danced in the fading light. The once serene landscape now felt like a labyrinth of dark secrets and hidden dangers, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, lurking just beyond the trees. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I heard it. A low, guttural growl echoing through the silent forest. My blood turned to ice in my veins as I turned to see a massive bear emerging from the shadows, its eyes fixed on me with a hungry glint. In that moment, all thoughts of fear and panic fled from my mind, replaced by a primal instinct for survival. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I turned and ran, my feet pounding against the frozen ground as I raced through the snow, the bear hot on my heels. For what felt like an eternity, I ran, my heart pounding in my chest as I fought to stay one step ahead of the relentless predator behind me. Every muscle in my body screamed in protest, begging me to stop and give in to exhaustion, but I refused to give up. And then, just when I thought I couldn't run any longer, I spotted a tree up ahead, its branches reaching out like welcoming arms. With a burst of desperate energy, I leaped for the lowest branch and began to climb, my fingers digging into the rough bark as I pulled myself up, higher and higher, until I was perched safely out of reach of the bear below. As I sat trembling in the branches, the cold wind biting at my skin and the snow swirling around me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of overwhelming relief wash over me. I had narrowly escaped death, but I knew that my ordeal was far from over. With the bear still prowling below, I knew that I would have to summon every ounce of courage and strength within me to survive the long, harrowing night ahead.
During a chilling January night, when the snowfall obscured the world outside our small Vermont house, my cousin Jason and I found ourselves trapped in a nightmare that still sends shivers down my spine. Our isolated abode, nestled deep within the forest, seemed like the perfect haven for tranquility. Little did we know, it would become the setting for a terrifying ordeal that would haunt us for years to come. As the new year dawned, Jason and I, still on school break, had planned a night of typical teenage indulgence, Xbox, movies, and the warmth of our humble living room. Yet, as the night wore on, Jason's attention was inexplicably drawn to the window, his gaze fixed on a point just beyond the frosted glass. At first, I dismissed it as mere fascination with the swirling snowflakes, until I noticed the tension in his posture, the unease in his eyes. Minutes stretched into eternity as Jason's gaze remained fixed, his breath hitching with each passing moment. It was then that I noticed it. A fleeting shadow darting between the trees, barely visible against the canvas of darkness. Panic clawed at the edges of my mind as I realized that we were not alone. Someone, or something, was lurking in the woods beyond. With each passing minute, the shadows seemed to multiply, their movements growing more erratic and sinister. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched, paralyzed with fear, while the darkness outside seemed to come alive with malevolent intent. And then, as if summoned by our terror, one of the shadows emerged from the darkness, its form silhouetted against the pale moonlight. Time seemed to stand still as the figure paused, its gaze fixed upon our humble abode, before lunging forward with unnatural speed. In that moment, primal fear gripped us, driving us to flee upstairs in search of safety. Yet, even as we sought refuge, the dread lingered, a palpable presence that seemed to seep through the very walls of our sanctuary. With trembling hands, we roused my father from his slumber, our voices choked with fear as we relayed the horrors unfolding outside. In the dim light of dawn, we ventured outside, our hearts pounding with trepidation, to confront the aftermath of the night's terror. What we discovered chilled us to the bone. Footprints, etched in the snow, encircling our home like the tracks of unseen predators stalking their prey. But the horror did not end there. As we surveyed the scene, we realized that our sanctuary had been violated, our shed ransacked, and our hunting knives stolen. It was a violation of our very sense of security, a grim reminder that even in the darkest corners of the world, danger lurked, waiting to strike when least expected. In the days that followed, the memory of that night haunted us, casting a shadow over our once idyllic existence. Though we eventually left that secluded house behind, the echoes of that fateful night lingered, a chilling reminder of the darkness that dwells just beyond the edge of our perception. And as I reflect upon those harrowing events, I am left with a profound sense of unease, knowing that sometimes the greatest terrors are those that lurk unseen, just beyond the reach of our understanding.